Thank you, PJ. It is time for another edition of the Parent and Spare podcast. I'm Justin Gaard from The Fan. We've got Chip Scoggins from the Star Tribune, Ryan Burns from Gopher Illustrated.com. We are presented, as always, by our great partners at Jack's Cafe, JAXCafe.com. As we go through the show today, guys, we'll outline details on a big Dinkytown Athletes event we're going to be doing Saturday, April 12th at Jack's Cafe. We'll give you info as the show goes on, as well as our social media channels. But because it is the off season, and every time we want to do a show, or I want to do a show, I ask you guys if we're available. Should we do something? Should we do an episode? Chip, you're always locked in. You write it in your planner. Burnsy's always like,
What are we going to talk about?
What are we going to talk about? What are we going to do?
I'm the pessimist. I'm the Johnny Raincloud of the trio. I know that.
I'm very busy. You know, I've got one job and living in his wife's house and multiple cats. Like you of all people, like you'd think you'd want to talk to somebody other than your cats. But so we're mixing it up. We're not going to make Burnsy create his own weather and talk about all his spring practice previews that are at GopherIllustrated.com right now. But this was the Chip Scoggins creation. It's a Chip Scoggins production. So what are we going to do today, Chip Scoggins, on the Parent and Spare podcast?
Yeah, we're going to welcome in the very first inaugural guest of Parent and Spare. We've been doing this, is this our fourth season?
We're like in the middle of three and four.
Yeah. So first guest that we've had, and we want to do this kind of regularly throughout the offseason here to bring on some former players, maybe a coach or two to talk Gopher football. And this guy, so I was thinking about it. I've had a chance to cover Gopher football almost a quarter century now. And I've said this publicly, and I'll say it.
You can tell.
Yeah, that's right. You can see the gray hair.
Yeah.
This guy is a top 10 player easily in my 25 years of covering Gopher football. Probably the toughest player I've ever seen play, and is a major award winner, All-American, two-time All-Big Ten tight end, and one of the great ambassadors and great people of Gopher football, Matt Spaeth.
Wow, look at that. And there he is. He just appears. Matt Spaeth on the Parent and Spare podcast.
Very good. Very good. So you got my email with the intro I wrote for myself, right?
That's right.
Yeah, what did he miss? What did he miss? Because I've got, freshman, all Big Ten.
Something about a Mackey Award. I don't know what that is.
We've got All-American first team, two-time All Big Ten, Super Bowl champ. You guys are going to talk Gophers. I just want like 50 Mike Tomlin stories. So we're going to get to those.
Right.
We got to get
to you sleep on Heath Miller stories. I bet you those.
we got to get to some of those.
I can tell you about Heath, but Heath is this comes from straight love of Heath Miller, because it sounds bad, but it's a compliment that Heath is the most annoyingly perfect human being to walk the face of the earth. And so that's what I had to live up to my whole professional career.
Yeah, there's a lot of guys like that. There's a lot of guys Eric Decker feels like he's one of those guys. Like when Eric Decker's around, it's like, how come more people don't go shirtless with their overalls? Their bib overalls, because they don't look like Eric Decker. Like it's just how it's going to go. Well, Chipper, you lead the way on this. You can as well. I've got a bunch of questions I want to ask, but you guys go, and we'll just take it wherever we go. I mean, you've got 4 hours, right, Matt? That's what Chip said. 4 hours.
Time. My kids are at school, so
mine too. We'll open the yearbook and just see what comes out. But Chipper, where do you want to start it off?
Yeah, so I had the good fortune of covering Matt's entire career from freshman to senior. And I would say, Matt, two things. I don't know if they're moments, but two things about your career stand out to me as kind of the face of them. And really the first one is your senior year, 2006. I don't know if people know this. We wrote it at the time, but you had a significant shoulder injury. I think it was a grade 5 shoulder separation. I remember Tony Brinkhouse telling me that when you took your shirt off in the training room, your entire shoulder was black and purple. And everybody told Matt to shut it down. They're 3-6. This thing's going nowhere. And Matt said, no, I'm going to finish out the season. They had to win the last 3 games. Iowa's in there, I think, Michigan State. But he played the last 3 games. I don't know how. And it wasn't like they were going to the Rose Bowl or even the Outback Bowl. It was just to get bowl eligible. And I don't know how you did it, but you finished the season. They won 3 straight games. And, Matt was a NFL prospect that had the combine and all those things to look forward to his NFL future, but he put those things on hold and said, I'm going to finish it out, and then had surgery after the season. So, man, what was that experience like, and how did you kind of gut through that, those final months?
Glenn Mason always talks about me, I should say, as like the toughest guy I've ever coached. And he did that while I was playing. And I look back on it sometimes and I think, was this such a good thing? It was great at the time, but it kind of set the stage for me to for something to always live up to. So I always felt like I always had to play through injuries. But I think that was just who I was. I am a team guy first. I always was, always will be. It wasn't about me. I could care less. I never judged my performance by numbers or stats. After a game, if I played well, I played well. And I could have had 0 catches and I was happy. But we won, or I played well, or I did my part. Going back to that injury, I initially had actually injured my shoulder in training camp, and it was a grade 3 separation. And to be honest, the grade 3 hurt way worse than the grade 5. That was painful. That took me out of camp for a little while. And then we played NDSU, and that's when I re-injured my shoulder. And I remember it happening, and I remember the hit. But it didn't feel like a whole lot, to be honest with you. And I went home after the game, and you kind of go out with your buddies. And I just remember, it's funny that you say Tony Brinkhouse told you this, because I remember his younger brother was on the team. And at the end of the night, he came up and gave me this big bear hug squeeze. And that's when I realized, I was like, what is that? Something ain't right. And so I went home, woke up the next morning. First thing, I went into the training room, and I'm like, something ain't right here. You know what I mean? They're like, all right, take your shirt off. So I just remember taking my shirt off, and there's 3 or 4 trainers standing there, and they were all just like, oh shit. because when my shoulder went from, a 3rd degree is just like a separation. The tendon or ligament, whatever, is stretched. Mine completely let go. And actually my collarbone is it's the ligament that holds your collarbone down and in place. When that let go, the collarbone actually shot up and punctured my trap muscle. So I was swollen and black and blue from the bottom of my ear down to below my shoulder. And I don't know what, looking back, I don't know what made me want to, continue to play or whatever, but it's just who I was. It was team first. It wasn't about me. I wanted to be out there. I do think I have a high tolerance for pain, unfortunately, sometimes, but there was no question to me I was going to do it.
Yeah, I mean, it was amazing. And then the other thing, senior year, big house, 3rd and 10. Cupido's on the sideline. He's out. I think Tony Mortenson's in.
Yeah.
You call a run and play to the right. I don't know what the thought process there. You're probably not thinking we're going to get 61 yards from Gary Russell, but the blocking on that, I think Tony Brinkhouse had the first one. The guy was stretching to try to get him, and then you and Jared Ellison on the outside. I don't know who you had your arms on, but you were driving that guy back, and just the lane that you created for Gary Russell to go 61 yards and set up the winning field goal there. And first time you beat Michigan in forever.
21 or 22 years, I think.
Yeah.
Right?
So that block kind of, I think, symbolizes your career in that best blocking tight end in college football. And I mean, what a moment. Was that the best block of your career? Or is that a highlight that play right there?
I mean, that play really stands out because honestly, going back, we owed Michigan, right? We had my freshman year.
Yes.
I believe we were up 21 or something a lot in the 4th quarter. Yeah. We lost. We had rushed for more yards than Michigan had given up in school history and lost the game. And then the next year, my sophomore year, we were in the big house again. And it wasn't but we were up in the 4th quarter, I believe, by 7, ended up losing. And to be honest, going back to that play, I think we were just trying to run out the clock because it was tied, if I believe.
Yep, 2020.
It was late in the game, and we just happened to spring a big run. So would I say that's my best block now, but it's maybe one of the more memorable ones, just because it was historic for us at the time. We hadn't beat them in, like I said, 21 or 22 years, and we did it. And who I was blocking, I don't know, but I'm going to say it was Lamar Woodley, even though I don't know that. because I ended up being a teammate of Lamar's and we were in the same draft class. And I love Lamar. And he always, so the story goes, Mike Tomlin always says that he drafted me because he was scouting Woodley, and he said I was the only guy that could handle him. Now,
That's
Woodley
awesome.
says it's the opposite, but I confirmed it with Tomlin here within the last year, and it was the other way around. So I'll say it's Woodley, even though I don't know.
That's right.
Case.
Well, and Woodley is the one that gave Coop a concussion in that game. I think he separated his. Yeah.
Woodley was a tremendous player, and he was a teammate of mine for a long time in the pros. And it's funny, I actually went up last year to Ann Arbor to the Michigan game with a buddy here in Pittsburgh. We drove up and we went to Woodley's tailgates, and it was great. So
that's awesome.
So I want to keep it in that 2006 season because you end up winning the Mackey Award, best tight end in college football. Yet I look at the stats from that season, Matt, and Ernie Wheelwright's on that team, Gopher legend, a young Eric Decker. But do you know who led the team in receiving touchdowns by a long margin?
I have no idea, to be honest.
It was Logan Payne with 9. So what animosity was there between you, Cupido, and his best buddy Logan Payne here that we couldn't get the Mackey Award winner to have more receiving touchdowns than 4 at the end of the season?
Is that all I had? I missed a couple games. No, I mean, Logan was a great player. Logan's a good buddy of mine. I was down at the bowl game with Logan and Tony and Steve Shadell, and Logan was a great player. And I actually think Logan would have had a little more of an NFL career if he didn't get hurt. But Logan was a hell of a player. We had weapons, and so a lot of our pass game was obviously predicated on the run because we ran the ball so much. So we were run the ball, and play action. So those receivers had a lot of opportunities, even though they would tell you that they probably hated the system because they only ran a few different routes and we didn't throw the ball very much. But when we threw the ball, those guys were wide open. So.
Yeah, that's where I wanted to go. Like a tight end now, you see what it's become in the NFL. Like they're not always expected to block, right? A whole lot. And I'm guessing that was the opposite in a Glenn Mason offense. When you pull up and you're a tight end, no wonder your shoulder got mangled if you're having to block 50 times a game. So what was that like just maybe throughout your entire career coming in from high school? I'm sure you blocked a lot in high school. I'm sure you were physical in high school, but we're going to run the ball here. These guys behind us, whether it's Barber, Maroney, Russell, whoever it is, they're going to get the ball, and we need you to spring holes for them.
Well, Garzi, I don't know if you know this, but I played linebacker in high school.
I just saw you played basketball, and I wanted to talk about that. Yeah. I want to know what kind of hooper you were.
I was a 6'7", 210, 15-pound middle linebacker in high school. So
you were good with blocking. You were okay.
I had one job in high school, and that was see ball, get ball. I stood in the middle of the field. I read run, I read pass, and I read trap. And those were my only 3 things. So when I got to Minnesota, they recruited me. I was getting recruited for different positions by different schools, some tight ends, mostly defensive end. They I think just did me the favor of starting me at linebacker in training camp my freshman year. And there was, I mean, like I said, I read 3 things in college. So when they started talking about curl the flat, the hook, and this guy out, and these coverages and different things, it was so beyond me. I think I lasted 2 days at linebacker in college, which is fine. But then they moved me to defensive end, which was a position I never played. I redshirted. And to be honest with you, my freshman year was not fun or easy because I played defensive end and I was just a guy. And you start to have like that moment of realization that like, okay, maybe football, maybe I'm not as good at football as I thought I was, right? And I'm just another guy. It's, I just didn't have great feelings about it. And thankfully, I talk about this all the time. I'm so lucky and fortunate that they switched me to tight end going into my second year, because I can remember like the very first day of practice. I have a vivid memory of this, of practice ending and just being like, oh my gosh, like that was so much better. And I remember guys, other tight ends or other teammates just coming up to me and they're like, hey, like, you did pretty good. Like, you're pretty good. And I was like, yeah. I was like, I felt nice, but I just talked to Coach Mason about this a couple of weeks ago and like how, I just think about what could have been or would have been if they never switched me, like that probably happens so much where guys get played out of position and they could have looked at me like, well, maybe Matt's not that great, but we'll continue to develop him. We don't have a lot of depth at defensive end or whatever. Maybe by, his senior year, he'll be able to contribute a little bit. So I'm lucky and fortunate in so many ways that they did switch me to tight end.
Matt, why? First of all, what size did you come in at as a freshman? And was it something you approached them, or was it just their idea to switch you?
No, it was their idea to switch me. And going back to that is you spend that whole year kind of doubting yourself, right? Like, oh, I'm not, like I said, not real good at this. And then you get the call that like, hey, we're going to switch you. It was a phone call, I remember. And it just kind of confirms what you believed in yourself. Like, yep. They don't think I'm very good at it either. You know what I mean?
I was right. I do suck at this.
Yeah.
That's right. That's the truth. That's exactly how I felt. And so, like I said, it was a little bittersweet until that first practice. And it was like, oh my gosh, this is where I belong.
Yeah. What size were you when you came in? Do you remember?
I was like 225 probably when I first reported.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, then you get to the tail end of your career, and I think, what were you, 260, 270?
I was, to be honest with you, at one point in my college career, I was 270, which was too big for me. I played most of my professional career at around 258 to 262.
So how does a guy go from 225 to 260, 270?
Let me tell you, Burns, I was on the gain weight club, the breakfast club, my entire career.
So what was that, like 4,500 calories a day, or what was it?
Well, listen, I'm not knocking anybody, because I think this has evolved and gotten a lot better over the years with like nutrition and what to eat and stuff. But it was like I had to keep a food journal. I had to write down everything I ate. I had to turn it into our strength coach. I had to get up early and eat breakfast in his office every morning. And he didn't care what you ate as long as it was like high calories, right? Like I could say, yesterday I ate 2 frozen pizzas. I went to McDonald's for lunch and yada, yada, all this stuff. And he'd be like, great. And then we had these shakes. We had these shakes, and it came in like a milk carton type thing where you, like the old school milk cartons where you got to open them up. And it was like this 1,000-some calorie shake. And when you drank that, you could pretty much set a timer and you'd be running to the bathroom like shortly after. It was so that's how I gained so much weight. It wasn't always the best weight, I don't think. But I think nowadays, if I was going through it, it would be done differently and better. But that's how it was.
I think Tom Brady used a lot of those principles for the TB12 method.
Tom Brady did about the exact opposite of what I did.
I seem to remember frozen pizza was a big part of the TB12 to allow him to play to 45.
Yeah.
So we're kind of bouncing all over, but how'd you get to you? Obviously, for St. Michael, obviously now it's like a burgeoning suburb. Back in our day, for a first-ring suburb guy, Matt, it felt like St. Michael, Albertville was like, Fargo to someone like me. Now it's, in the same conference as Wayzata and Minnetonka and all these things. So take us through just kind of the recruiting process and how you decided to come to the U of M.
Yeah. So, you start, the recruiting process has probably changed a lot too, but you start just getting letters. And I remember getting my first letter, and I want to believe it was like my first one was from Ohio State. And then all of a sudden more and more letters start coming in, and then you start getting calls, and you get, visits to your high school. And recruiting was a whirlwind. I was confused. I didn't know what I wanted to do. My dad played football at Nebraska.
Yep.
Nebraska was recruiting me. Everybody thought I was going to go to Nebraska because of that. I actually have a great story about Nebraska recruiting if you guys want to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So I guess
that's what we're here for, right?
Yep.
That's right.
My dad obviously played football at Nebraska, like I said, and Nebraska's recruiting me, and they do the home visit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in hindsight, I actually understand this and I get this because this is the way it has to be done. But they came to my house, the head coach, I actually don't remember who it was even at the time, head coach and a position coach. We were sitting at the island at my parents' house, and they were basically told me that like, hey, there's a guy, like, we like your son, but there's this other guy we want more. And if we get him, we probably won't have a spot for your son. And if we don't get him, then we have a scholarship for your son. And my dad just sat there and he looked at him. He said, "You guys can leave now. This is over." And I don't even think he said it that nice, but I don't want to say the words on the podcast. But yeah, he threw Nebraska out of our house when they said that I was kind of like, maybe
Plan B.
Wow.
Maybe we have. Like, I was plan B, and he just said, "This is over. You guys get out."
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for coming.
Because you guys were at the Nebraska game 2 years ago, right? I think that's the last time that we talked.
Yep.
Down on the field. Yeah, that's cool. That's funny. Yeah. Those coaches are
Hey,
like,
Matt,
well, I guess we'll head back to Lincoln.
So,
That didn't work out so well.
It didn't work out so good. And, and I think for my dad, like, obviously he played at Nebraska, but he's a Minnesota kid. And, he was tickled that I ended up going to Minnesota. But anyways, going back to recruiting, I'll be honest with you, for a while, I didn't think I was going to go to Minnesota. I actually thought I was going to go to Wisconsin. I hate to say that right now. But I was close to pulling the trigger, and Minnesota essentially just convinced me. They're like, just take a visit here. You know what I mean? And I went and I loved it. And I think like everything I thought in my head that I was not going to like about it, I was like, I like this. You know what I mean? So chose Minnesota and don't regret it for a second.
I mean, and you came in too when there was no facility, playing at the Metrodome. I mean, it was a totally different program than what you see now.
Way different. Yeah. But, and honestly, like those things, they don't mean much to me. You know what I mean? Like it was about other stuff for me. I even, not to get off subject, but I remember like then coming out after college and you got to choose an agent. And it was similar where like you get all these agents coming in and they talk to you about stuff that doesn't matter, like, oh, hey, we're going to send you for 2 months to train here. And we'll put you in, look at the pictures of this apartment and we'll get you this car to drive while you're there. And I'm like, this is 2 months of my life. Like, this means nothing to me. Like, I want to talk like big picture stuff. You know what I mean? Like, that's not important to me. So it was similar in a ways in how I chose or went about it, that I know it's important to kids but it wasn't important to me.
That's fascinating. When you were recruited, what were other schools looking at you for different positions, or was there kind of what the Gophers did? We don't know. We don't know what you are, but we'll get you on campus.
Kind of, yeah. It was pretty much always like off or tight end or defensive end. I know everybody kind of had a different idea. I couldn't go back and remember like which school was this or that.
So when your shoulder's mangled and you beat Iowa, can you actually lift the Floyd of Rosedale, or do you need help to get the trophy in 2006?
No, I mean, if you can go out and play a football game, you can lift a trophy, especially with that adrenaline. So
that's what I was wondering, because that was such a fun game, and obviously you needed it. And Iowa was coming off just a year or two from couple of Big Ten titles. They were obviously rolling. It's always a big rivalry game. But to beat them in the Metrodome, to be bowl eligible, like, what do you remember about that game?
Not much, to be honest with you. I
really
don't.
You want me to take you through the whole thing? I remember I was there. I was there for a lot of it.
I just had this conversation with the guys down at the bowl game, and like I say this like not in an arrogant way, but a lot of like those guys, college was the last games they played.
Sure.
So they remember those things and they remember the details a lot more than me. I went on and played, 100 and some more games that have clouded my memory. You know what I mean?
Right.
So like, there's certain things I remember, but I don't remember a lot of like the details. And I don't think it's anything to do with like the head thing or concussions. I really don't.
Yeah, right.
I just think I, played so many more games after that
That's
I
hilarious.
don't always remember the details.
Sorry, Tony Brinkhouse. Sorry,
that's
Bubba.
right. Yeah, that's right.
So you're not going to get invited to the reunions.
That's right.
And I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about that.
So here's what. See if you remember this. Who was the toughest college player you went against? Had a block.
Probably two guys stick out. Erasmus James.
Oh yeah.
Because I played against him when I was, he was a senior and I was probably, I can't remember, freshman or sophomore, but he was a beast. And I know the Vikings drafted him, right?
They did.
Yeah.
And high. And I know it never really panned out for him, but
Aaron Rodgers was available, by the way, and then drafted Erasmus James.
Don't worry. It's fine. Erasmus was the right pick.
Troy Williamson too. It all worked out great.
But he was tough. I mean, he was incredible in college. And then the guy that was just tougher and heck was Matt Roth from Iowa. He was a white defensive end, and he was like the epitome of like a character on a football movie where he was just a meathead and big and strong and mean and angry. And we used to run. So you guys remember this probably. We would do like this thing where I'd split out wide and then motion in and crack the end.
Crack back
now, but I would do it. And we did it. We did it sparingly, but enough. And I remember going against Iowa and running that. And normally, they're tilted in at the defensive or the offensive tackle, and you kind of come in and almost like blindside him a little bit. And he got in his 3-point stance and he angled right out at me. And he was just, kind of down in his stance, just like, like looking at me like I'm going to kill you. You know what I mean? Like, you ain't getting me. That stands out for sure.
I remember thinking, like, when I'd see you go in motion, do that, you'd see that defensive end keep turning his head to look to see if they're coming, because he knew he was coming. Yeah.
Oh, I remember a couple different times in practice where we would practice that over and over and over. And I was about to like pass out, and I would just be like looking at Mitch, like, are you kidding me? Like I'm just sprinting. I'm just splitting out and sprinting in and hitting the guy, sprinting, running out, sprinting in and cracking a guy. Like, why do we need to practice this so much?
Well, now you're going to make me ask about Mike Sherrills, because you went against him every day in practice, leading tackler from that 06 team. I just saw him at the boat show a couple weeks ago. You had to block him every day for years. What was the Mike Sherrills experience like?
I love Mike, and I'll be honest with you, Mike and I got into a lot of quarrels at practice.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Like if there was anybody that I butted heads with, but it was all love. Like that's how I was. I mean, I had guys like that and even in the NFL that were teammates that it was like it would get physical, it'd get chippy, it'd get not nice out on the practice field. But afterwards, I was fine, and I liked Mike, and so I think Mike's a great guy. He was a great player. He was, man, talk about a guy that maximized. Like I think Mike would be the first to tell you, like his abilities were not great. He wasn't like big. I'm not saying he was small, but he wasn't fast. Like he didn't have like the attributes, but he was a hell of a football player. You know what I mean? And he just maximized everything, that he had to his fullest ability. But we got into it a lot at practice.
That's fun. Matt, do you ever stop and think about like those teams, just the talent you guys had, particularly on offense? I mean, you and Esslinger and Sederstrom and Bubba, obviously Maroney, Barber. I mean, there was some high-end talent on that offense in, your time.
Yeah. And, honestly, that's probably why we were always so good on offense and our defense struggled. And I'm not knocking those guys, but I think Mitch had the pick of the litter when it came to guys. That's probably how I got switched to tight end.
Barber came in as a safety.
Yeah. What's crazy? I was thinking about this too with Greg going into the NCAA Hall of Fame is my freshman year, me, Greg, and Mark Sederstrom were all roommates. Isn't that wild?
Creepers.
So there you go. Once again, when you talk about like my freshman year, you expect big things of yourself. And here's my two roommates starting as true freshmen, all stars. And then there's me, you know what I mean?
Whoa.
So, but I went on to live with Greg for, 3.5 years. He didn't redshirt, so I stayed another year. But I give a lot of credit to, I guess, my development to Greg, because Greg was like Heath in the pros for me, where like he was the rabbit I chased, and Greg was a consummate professional. Nobody worked harder. Nobody took better care of himself. Here's another story. Greg was all world, and I remember after maybe like my sophomore or junior year where I was playing tight end and having success, and Greg was going to go on to do great things. And Greg, we'd get up and do the summer workouts, 6 a.m. summer workouts, which were hellacious, right? And most guys, you'd go back and you'd sleep for 4 hours because they were so hard. Greg would come back, take a little nap, eat or whatever, and he'd go for a run. And I remember trying to do that with him a couple times, and we would run the bus route from, from campus to St. Paul campus.
Yep.
And I remember running with him, and after like probably not very long, I was like, go ahead.
Where's the bus?
I'll meet you back at the apartments. You know what I mean? But he was incredible, man. He was the best athlete probably of our whole team, and definitely the most well-conditioned.
I remember you talk about a guy who came in nobody wanted, right? As NDS, you were here, and it might have been a 2-star. And I remember Maroney telling me one time that you guys would turn on tape and the running backs would be down the field, and here comes Esslinger flying down the field to get one more block, just crawling, trying to, that guy played hard every play.
Yeah.
So what were those running backs like? I mean, Chip just mentioned a lot of them. Obviously, Barber and Maroney are forever going to go down in history together. And even having, Lawrence here, I think it was this past season, right, when he held up the jersey, or maybe the season before with Marion, who's obviously no longer with us. I mean, what a wild time those two had. And when you guys got it rolling, it was over at the Metrodome. A lot of those games, you could tell early, like, this team's they're not here for this. Like, they're not here for this physicality.
And, think about like Thomas Tepe or even Gary Russell. Like, Gary was one of my favorite backs to block for, because you knew where Gary was going, and it was downhill. And we had just such a plethora, and even like Amir Penix, who was just lost in the shadows, and then all of a sudden he gets his opportunity. And so yeah, we had incredible backs. And the one thing I'll always remember about Marion is when I first got to campus and we were doing summer workouts and guys have their shirt off, Marion had muscles that I didn't even know existed.
Yeah,
I mean it. Like, he had muscles that stacked on top of his muscles that probably nobody else has. He was just a freak, and such a good guy. All those guys were such good guys, and fairly humble and down to earth. And yeah, it was fun. And we had a great O-line that made those guys look good, but those guys made us look good too,
I probably told you this, guys, but Marion is one of those guys that you heard about before you saw him. There was like the Joe Mauer. You heard about this kid from St. Paul, and then as Chip knows, we were all in the class of 2001. He highlighted 3 great athletes from the class of 2001, Matt. He tells me I was the 4th. I didn't make the cut in 2001. It was Marion, it was Fitz, and it was Joe, right?
Yeah.
Those were the 3. But Marion Barber's the kid. You're at Concord Elementary School, and your buddies come back, from 4th grade football, and they go, "There's this kid whose dad played for the Jets. Like, he must have had like 400 yards." And you're like, "Oh, okay, that's cool. Well, it's pizza day down here at the cafeteria." But that's from like Wayzata to Edina. You just heard about guys like Marion, right? I mean, those are the legendary stories.
Yeah, crazy. Marion was something else, that's for sure.
Matt, give us a Mace story. We need a Mace story. We need a series of Mace stories now to use at later dates, because he's got a different version, I've learned, of every story between former players and him. His version always makes himself look a lot better. So we got to find the filter somewhere in the middle of some Mace stories.
It's funny you say that, because leading up to this, I was trying to think of some Mace stories, and it was like either that's not that great, or no,
can't tell that one.
That's not appropriate. It was hard for me. I love Coach Mason. He was, I don't know, I thought he was a great coach, great guy. Still talk to him. I could probably tell you some more Mitch Browning stories than I could of Glenn Mason, but Mason was our head coach, right? So he was around, but not, you don't connect with them necessarily on quite the level of like your position coach or your coordinator, which Mitch was my coordinator and my position coach. So I could probably tell you a lot more about Mitch.
Yeah, I mean, Matt, I always said that the way you guys, that scheme that Mitch and Mace came up with, but Mitch, I mean, that zone blocking, you guys ran that to perfection. I mean, was Mitch just kind of like a mad scientist with this, or kind of what was he like in constructing that scheme?
He was a perfectionist, is what he was. And it wasn't like we had some, crazy scheme that nobody else ran. We just ran it better than everybody else, and we worked it. Mitch was old school. I was lucky. I had Coach Browning in college, and then, my tight end coach in the NFL. They were the same guy in a lot of ways. They were old school, they were hardcore, they were tough, and you could never please them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they just demanded perfection. And when you're playing for them at the time, it's not easy, right? In some instances, but you look back on it and you're so grateful and thankful to have coaches like that. And so Mitch, we worked hard. We worked it all the time. Technique. I mean, Mitch was such a big technique guy. And you got to have your technique down. Football is such the greatest team sport, because there's 11 guys out on the field, and everybody has to do their job to be successful. But you don't worry about the guy next to you. You got to trust the guy next to you, and you've got to take care of your business. And so we were so honed in on the details and the technique that it just worked.
Yeah, I'm always fascinated when football players talk about technique, and like. It just seems like such a chaos of plays, just such chaos of bodies and slant, but they're like one false step or one hand get here that if you're out, you're done. Is it really that
Absolutely.
that precise?
Absolutely. Yeah, because, at certain levels of football, you can get away with just dominance, right? And some guys can, right? Even throughout, because maybe they're just that physically dominant. But everybody is good. Like I think about myself. Like every guy I went against, or was probably lifted more weights, was stronger, ran a faster 40, could jump higher, everything like that. But I had great technique and I had heart. And I honestly think the one thing that set me apart was like this desire. It was every single play of every single practice. It's me or this guy, whoever I'm blocking. And it's either he's going to win or I'm going to win, but damn it ain't going to be him. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter how tired you are or how you're feeling or if you're hurting. It is a war every time on a single play basis, and it is you versus him.
I remember talking to you when Keefe was coming out, and do you think that your mindset, because the idea of a tight end in football has changed from you got to be this athletic, sleek, pass catching, you're this offensive weapon. I remember calling you and asking, is there still a place for a guy like Keefe in the NFL? And you're like, absolutely, because there's a lot of him in you, like just going to figure out a way to get it done.
Yep.
I mean, do you think that's why you survived? I mean, obviously you're talented, but I mean, that helped you survive so long in NFL that as the position changed, that you still were going to do your job really at a high level?
No doubt. And I'm so thankful to have even come to Pittsburgh where they valued a guy like me, because it's different, right? Like different schemes, different teams, the way they use their tight end. And you see a lot of just like you said, the more receiving type, a lot of these tight ends don't block. And if they do, it ain't great. But there are teams that value it. And I remember talking to Co about that, is like, you find, you'll have carve out a niche, you know what I mean? And embrace your niche and master your craft, because certain teams still have a desire for that and still need that. And if you're reliable, and they can count on you to block defensive ends and outside linebackers in the NFL, you have a role and you can play a long time. And you might not ever have the huge contract like some of these guys, but who cares?
Well, many people are saying that Matt Spaeth walked so that Darnell Washington could run now for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
That's right.
So you mentioned Keefe. I mean, we could talk Max Williams. We could talk Brevin Spanford. Are there any Gopher tight ends throughout the years since you've graduated that you've been like, yeah, I would have loved to block next to that guy?
It's a good question. Great question, Burnsy.
There you go, Burnsy. We finally got one from you.
Wow. Probably Co, man. Could you imagine Co and I lining up next to each other?
Man.
That would have been fun.
Would you have grown a mullet with him, walked pregame with bare feet on no matter what the surface is and the temperature with him?
I'm a barefoot guy. I could have probably done that, but I definitely wouldn't grow out a mullet. No way.
Yeah. No.
Some guys can do it. Some guys can't. You know what I mean? I'm not one of them.
Yeah, Keefe, the first guy to say the F word on the Gopher Sports Network after they beat Wisconsin. Yeah, after they beat Wisconsin, I think his final home game. And then Tyler Nubin did it a couple years later, so it's become kind of a trend. Everything's getting loose. You mentioned Pittsburgh, obviously. We'll start the NFL discussion, Matt, with the cliched "Welcome to the NFL" moment. I mean, did you have one of those? Was it weird walking into the facility the first day and going, "All right, yeah, I'm here. Like I'm in the National Football League. It's time to go."
Yeah, and honestly, I did have that, and I don't know if it ever stopped,
Cool.
Because you're in the NFL and college football too, especially now. You're just under such a microscope. You know what I mean? So everything you do is watched and judged and critiqued. So I never kind of stopped walking on eggshells, if that makes sense. I know what you're saying is like a welcome to the NFL moment, but it was kind of like I always had this nervousness inside me or something like that, because you're always competing and you're always, every year they're drafting new guys and they're drafting guys to replace you. And every year you're fighting for your job, and every game that you're out there, you're being watched, judged, critiqued by tons of people. You know what I mean? So I don't think that ever really stopped for me.
Yeah, I've heard guys talk about that professional anxiety that they felt like that profession, that league. It's like they're just waiting to replace you, right? Yeah. So you have to, even on practice days, you can't.
The level of competition, and this goes back to what I said earlier about just like taking it one play at a time and just wanting to win every play. You really realize that when you get to the NFL, because if you don't give it your all, even on like a non-padded day, or you're going against a practice squad guy, guess what? Those practice squad guys are good. And anybody you're going against, if you don't give it your all on every single play, they will make you look stupid.
Yeah. Hey, Matt, we watch Hard Knocks, and I'm always fascinated behind the scenes, when, like in the film room when they're watching, these coaches are just like ripping them to shreds. What is that like to be in that film room after a game where you're just getting annihilated by your coach over? I mean, I'm sure they're stressing the positives, but the stuff you did wrong, what's that like?
Oh, it's tough. It is tough. And like after a game and you're going into film the next day, whether it was going to be, good or bad. And you have a good feeling. But there's still, like in any game, even if you played good, there's still going to be a play. And I know Coach Tomlin would kind of like go through kind of like the sequence of the game. And we wouldn't see all the plays, but it'd be kind of like bigger plays or, moments throughout the game that he thought, tilted it one way or another. And I just remember you would sit in that room and you'd just be like, like your bad play and like where it was in the game. Like, oh God, please don't show that one. Please don't. Because, like then you break up and you watch it like individually with like your position coach. At least we did. But man, you're just dreading. And then all of a sudden, like maybe you get to a point in the game where that play has been like already run and he's not showing it. And you're just like, oh, you sit back in the chair, you breathe a sigh of relief. So it's not good, because when you do that, I liked us doing that because we did it as a team, and we held everybody accountable, and everybody held you accountable. But that's why those good moments were great to be recognized, but the bad moments when you're called out aren't the easiest. I remember in college when I was like, I don't remember what game, but it was very early, my freshman year that I actually played. And it was the same thing, you're walking up to like the meetings, and I probably played good and I was feeling pretty good about myself. And so you're feeling good going into the meeting because whether you did good or bad. And I just remember Coach Browning, I'm walking and he's like, I didn't see him. And also I hear, hey, 89. And I stop. I just like froze and I just like turned around and he's like, like chewed me out for like a certain play. Like, what the hell were you doing on this and that? And I was just like, oh shit. Like I went from feeling great about my performance to really bad. And then all of a sudden I remember just like frozen, and I look at him and he just kind of cracks a little smile. And that's when I figured Mitch Browning out. Yeah. And I think that's when, like I said, he was tough. He was hard to please, but he demanded perfection, and I love him for it. And I knew right then and there that, like, all right, Mitch and I got a special relationship.
Yeah, you're a made man.
Time, but then he kind of cracked the smile, like, but you did pretty good, kid. You know what I mean?
Right.
So what's the Tomlin secret?
I was about to say, you came into the NFL with Tomlin, and then you obviously played for him for a long time. What's Mike Tomlin about?
He is just like as real and forthright as you can get, and that is such an unbelievable thing. You always know where you stand, good, bad, or indifferent. And it sounds crazy, like maybe you wouldn't want to know good, if it's bad, but like you go some places, and I played, another team, I won't name them, but like you never knew where you stood, and there was always, I felt like, secrets or things going behind, going on behind your back. And in Pittsburgh, everything was just out there, and you always knew where you stood. And Coach Tomlin is just he's a leader, and when he walks into the room, I'm telling you, I don't know if you guys have ever sat. I mean, obviously you've seen press conferences and different things, but him as a speaker, I mean, you are glued in the entire time when he is talking. So he's I love him. I really do.
Chip, were you on the Gopher beat or Vikings when he was hired as defensive coordinator?
I was on the Gopher beat, but my Vikings buddies it said he would have his, you'd talk to him and like, yeah, this guy's not going to be here long. He's going to be a head coach pretty quickly.
The first press conference. Right? So he got hired in 2006. I'm 24 years old. I'm standing in the old Winter Park meeting room, and they introduced Mike Tomlin, this 34-year-old from Tampa that worked for Dungy. Mm-hmm. And I'm standing there, and I'm 24. I don't know anything about anything. And I'm listening to it, and I'm like, huh. Like,
Yeah.
this guy's like 10 years older than me. Like,
Yeah.
he's 34, and
Yeah.
like he just had a presence. And then the defense got good. And I remember saying with Paul Allen during the season, because I was working with him, are we worried Tomlin's one and done here? Because and PA's like, no chance. I'm like, well, the defense is really good, and I know if he gets an interview, he's winning the interview.
Oh, yeah.
So it's a wrap. And so next thing you know, he's the head of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he's still there. But presence was the word even that I could pick up just from being in that little media room, Chipper. I'm like, this guy is as impressive a person as I've ever seen. And I still think about it almost 20 years later.
Yep, and he's still the same way. He is still the same way. Absolutely.
What was he like before a game, the most before the game, getting you guys ready? Was he great in those settings, or is it more just the day-to-day?
I mean, it was a day, meetings throughout the week, daily basis, and then kind of like he didn't do a lot of talking in like the locker room before a game. It was like our Saturday night meetings at the hotel is when he kind of came in and gave his thing, which was always the last thing of the night. So it always made it hard to go back and go to sleep. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's why you're ready to run through a wall at that point. Yeah.
He had his big game music. So at his big games, he would give his little talk, and then he would shut off the lights and he would play Phil Collins in the Air Tonight. So we'd all
do it. Get out of that'd be it.
And, yeah, it was incredible.
When those drums hit.
Phil Collins.
I now play that song sometimes when I'm dropping my girls off for school to get them
yeah. You got to get them hyped.
All right, girl, sit back. I got a song for you.
Yeah, it's a big. You got a test. You got a presentation in school today. Totally.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we play the music.
Yeah.
So does he play? Is like in the Air Tonight? Is that playing before the Super Bowl in Tampa against Arizona? I was actually at that game, which is crazy enough. So you listen to that.
We do like all the time, but like kind of towards the end of the year and getting into playoffs maybe, and like I said. That's when we'd start to do it.
The one I love is at Pittsburgh, guys. I remember covering games there, and the Vikings sideline went nuts. I remember Jared Allen's when they play Sticks.
Yeah.
What's the song?
Renegade.
Renegade. Oh my God, the place goes nuts when they do
it.
All us old guys.
Yeah, you were lit, huh, Chip? Yeah, you were feeling it. Yeah, you were holding your phone up with the light.
18-year-old Chip came alive there.
For a long time, that was a great thing because they always wait to do it. When the defense is taking the field in the fourth quarter. Yeah. But I do remember there was a year where it was like it was cursed. We'd be like winning. All we need is like a stop. They'd play Renegade, and every time that year the team would go like the other offense would go like 90 yards for a touchdown. So it wasn't always great.
Yeah. So Matt, Super Bowl. What was that day like? What was that experience like? And did you sleep the night before?
No. I actually didn't sleep very much before any games. And even in college, guys, I had I played a lot of games on like zero sleep.
Really?
And that's why when I talk about like the stress
and frozen pizza. Frozen pizzas and zero sleep
of of football. And when my time was done, everybody asked me like, what are you looking forward to? I'm like, sleeping. Just sleeping and relaxing. But so no, probably not much sleep, and you're nervous, right? You're playing in the biggest game in the world, right? And everybody's watching, so it is nerve-wracking. The experience is incredible. I was fortunate to play in two.
Yep.
We won one, lost one, so you kind of obviously wish you would have won both, but you get to experience both sides of it. And when you win, there's nothing greater, and the things I remember are, after the game and being down on the field and the confetti raining down on you, and you go and you find your family and you get them down on the field, and then you go to the locker room and there's a big celebration in the locker room, and then to the after party, and it's all incredible. And then you play in one where you lose, and it's just all for nothing. It is literally all for nothing. There's not a worse feeling in the world, because you think about your preparation started long before, but you started training camp in late July.
Right.
And now here you are in February. And all that work and effort, the way you feel, maybe it's not, but the way you feel is it was all for nothing.
Wow. How long does it take you? I always think about the losing Super Bowl team, like how long that next day when they wake up, or how long does it take you to get over the disappointment or the frustration, or what?
I would say it's different for different guys. And honestly, it probably really goes back to like your performance, right? Me personally, the Super Bowl we won, I didn't play very good. I've never watched that Super Bowl since.
Really?
No, I refused to. I was my second year. I don't know. I just didn't. I was not happy with my performance, and I've never watched it. And so then you fast forward to the second Super Bowl 2 years later, and I played great. And because I knew like I'm not going through this again, right?
Wow.
And I was super happy with my performance, but we lost. So I always think in any game, it's harder, right? If you feel like you did something, and it's a team game, and there's a lot of stuff that goes on, right? But when you don't perform well and you lose, you feel like you lost it for your team. But if you go out and you play well and your team loses, you can kind of walk off with your head high, right? Like, okay, it didn't work out, but I feel like I did my part and I played well. So I feel like I maybe got over that one faster than maybe some guys, right? Because I knew that at least I did my part, where if I would have not played well and we were lost, then I would have you wouldn't have been able to convince me that it wasn't my fault that we lost. That's just that's how we're wired. You know what I mean? That's how we are. Yeah. So there's, I have, when it comes to the two Super Bowls, I kind of wish it was the opposite, but it is what it is.
So you're very grateful for Ben Roethlisberger and Santonio Holmes in the Tampa.
You're glad James Harrison,
James Harrison, that was right before halftime, right? The 99-yard fumble.
Yeah,
that was
interception.
Interception. That's what it was.
It's funny because when you go back and you watch some of these things, he didn't even do the right thing. He was supposed to be rushing. He was supposed to be rushing the passer, and he just decided to drop into coverage, and they threw it right to him. Isn't that crazy?
Football. That's why coaches go crazy, man.
Yeah.
Like like you said, you work for a whole offseason on everything. The Super Bowl, Harrison goes, I'm going to do my own thing, and it worked out. If it doesn't, you could be talking about something else. That's right. Crazy. That's crazy.
Hey, man, I want to ask you just about college football and college sports right now. NIL, transfer portal, revenue share. When you look at it, what do you think?
I think it is what it is. You know what I mean? Like, and I mean that in the sense that it's so different, and I think it'd be easy to sit here and say, I don't like it or I pick it apart, but there's a lot of good to it too. Right. And I think there's things that they got to kind of figure out or iron out as they navigate this new world. But it's still college football and it's still great. Right. And it's different, but it's still awesome. And so I think it's great that some of these kids are getting money and getting paid, and a lot of them need it. And then there's some negative to it, right? And I can tell you, I wouldn't want to be a coach in this world, but I still think it's a great sport and it's a great league.
A couple things for me. Your favorite road venue that you played in college, and what was any memorable things you got shouted at you on the road?
Well, Iowa is the meanest. Anywhere you go, right? There's hostility, and you get used to it from like the students and the kids and yelling and saying mean things. But Iowa, they're literally right behind you, and it's like grown adults, and they say the meanest things.
So true.
It is brutal.
Yeah.
They are next level when it comes to that kind of stuff.
There's a lot of wives sitting in shame next to husbands that are screaming at 22-year-old.
And they're so close to you, so you can hear them. And they're downright ruthless. I can say that.
Would you laugh like when you hear that stuff? Would you
laugh?
Yeah,
that stuff don't faze me at all. Like I thought it was funny, and you kind of like sit there and you're on the bench. If the defense is out there and you're sitting next to your offensive guys, and you kind of just like look over at each other and smile and laugh and giggle.
Well, and then your first big purchase was on your NFL money, whether that was when you got drafted, whether that was in the free agency contract where you were like, I'm going to go spend some of this adult money that I got from the NFL.
You know what, Burnsy? I'm kind of boring when it comes to that.
What are you going to tell me? You went and bought 40 acres like my dream or what?
No, like my rookie season, I bought a townhouse, but it wasn't nothing spectacular or super nice. I'll be honest with you. I was so different. Like you go through these rookie symposiums and all this like rookie kind of like meetings and trainings, and they're sitting there telling you about like you should save 20% of every paycheck, and I'm like 20%. Like I'm saving like 80%. You know what I mean? Like, you know, so I was probably wired a little, differently than other guys. I saved most of my money. And so I did buy a townhouse, and I did buy, a truck. I've driven a truck, ever since I got into the NFL, and that's all I need. You know what I mean? So there ain't been a lot of crazy splurges.
Is it a lift-kitted F-350, or what are you rolling around in?
It's just an F-150. It is a limited, the one I'm driving now. So
There you go.
whistles, but there's no lift. I don't like that stuff. I'm pretty basic. I will say this. This is recently, here in the last few years, I did restore a 1969 Dodge Charger. So that's probably my craziest splurge. So, and that was fun, and it is awesome. And never restore a car, they always say, because you go over budget pretty fast.
Burnsy, do your wife and you have separate checking accounts?
Yes.
That's good for her. That's what you got, because
Oh
you're spending Matt's money. I'm worried about what you're doing.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, you've got dollar signs in your eyes. That's crazy.
I know.
Anything else? I got like two last things, just kind of get an update on what you're up to, Matt. But anything else you guys want to touch on?
You can finish this out.
So what are you up to, Matt, besides restoring cars?
I have a family. I have 2 kids. They take a lot of my time. 2 daughters, 6 and 9, Aubrey and Kenley. And I also, since I've retired, I got into real estate. So I do it. I'd say I take it very serious in a sense, but I'm also maybe not your typical agent where I'm, pounding pavement every weekend. I have the good thing about playing in the NFL is you get to meet a lot of great people, a lot of cool, interesting, rich, powerful, significant type people that whatever you want to say. And I've realized that real estate, like anything, is a people business, and it is a sphere, and it is a networking business. And that is who I am. Like, I am just, I'm social. I like people like me. You know what I mean? So when I got done, I was like, what do I do? You know what I mean? Like I retired at 32, and I would say, like, I was like, oh, you retired at 32? I retired from football at 32.
Right.
I retired from life. You know what I mean? So I had to do something, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I was trying to figure it out. And finally I was just like, you know what? I'm going to try this. I'm going to get my real estate license. Easy to get, low barrier to entry. Not a lot of costs involved, and I'll try it. And if I don't like it, I check it off the list and I move on to the next thing. And at least maybe I learned some valuable life lesson type stuff, right? Because we all need housing, whether you're buying, renting, or whatever. You learn some valuable stuff. But I've really enjoyed it. It's like I said, I've been blessed here, and I have teammates I do business for, and I've gotten to know some cool people. I would say, compared to your typical agent, I don't do a ton of transactions, but the ones I do are pretty big most of the time. You know what I mean? And it's fun, so I like it.
And there's a competitiveness to it too, right?
Absolutely.
There's a little competitive nature to the real estate thing.
the rush of negotiating and putting something together, and then it's fun, and then, like, it's a people business, and it's a problem solving business. Like, that's pretty much what it is, and I like that aspect. And every transaction is different. There's obstacles, there's hurdles in every one, and you got to come up with unique ways to keep both parties together and get to the finish line. And that's what it is. It's just problem solving.
Are you one of those agents that when you walk in to the open house, they like do a crackback block on Matt Roth and go, hey, we've had a lot of interest, best and final in 10 minutes. And I haven't even taken my shoes off at the door. It's like, I don't even know if I can't give you best and final. I don't even know if I'm pre-approved yet. My wife wanted to see the pool. Like, what are we going to do here? Yeah. Are you one of those guys that just meets them in the hole and says best and final by 6?
Not at all. Not at all.
Thank you.
And you rarely find me at open houses either.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I would think I could sense that by your answer.
Yeah,
that you're not putting cookies out on the island with water bottles on your business cards.
Hey, Matt, I'd love to see you down there at the bowl game. Mitch Browning called, and you're there with Bubba Brinkhouse and Scheidel and Steve Davis, and I know you're still close with Coop. And
well, if only you would have came out to the bar.
I know.
Yeah,
we would have had a beer. I know.
You can't get the guy to the bowl games, Matt. I don't get it. We can't get him to the bowl games.
I'll tell you what, guys. I had so much fun down there. That was my first experience of just going to a bowl game as a fan. And obviously, you play, and your family and friends and people go, and they rave about, the Gopher tailgates or the get-togethers, and you never get to experience it, right? Because you're playing. And Bubba called me, text me or called me 2-3 weeks before, and he was like, "Hey," he's like, "Me and Steve and Logan are meeting down in Charlotte for the bowl game. You have any interest?" And I was like, "I do now." You know what I mean? So it was awesome. I mean, just to see those guys again and reconnect and just hang out and do the fan thing and go to the Gopher bars. I had a blast.
I can't imagine that. Well, I was there with you that night. You don't get to walk around an entire bar without somebody looking up at 6'7" and saying, "You look familiar," or "Hey, let's take a picture." Because I saw that happen plenty down in Charlotte.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that. And I also think there's a lot of people that had no clue who I was. And I'm fine with that too, to be honest with you. I just enjoyed it. I liked being around Gopher people. I'm trying to think who's the senior tight end this year, Burnsy? Is it like Gears or who's it?
Jameson Gears.
Nick Callerup.
And Nick
no, it was the Callerup crew. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yep.
So I at that bar that you were at, and I see this crew kind of sit in the corner and they all have Nick Callerup jerseys on. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to go talk to them. And they had no clue who I was. You know what I mean?
That's awesome.
And I just was like, "Hey, I'm Matt, and I used to play tight end here. So I saw you guys' jerseys, and I figured I'd come over and talk to you." And it ended up being awesome, and just trying to chatting with them.
Awesome.
And they're like, "Oh, so like, when did you play? And, were you good?" And I was like, "Yeah, okay."
Oh, I have the media guide here. Oh, I got Mackey Award winner. No,
Let me show you my Mackey Award.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Did my Super Bowl ring
see
hit
this
you?
Bowl ring?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Did that fall on the table?
So there's a good mix, obviously.
That's awesome.
Well, this was fun, man. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for
Yeah, I
taking.
appreciate
Thanks for opening up the yearbook. And it is cool. Like I always see this with Daryl Thompson, and this, but you're going to be doing these bowl trips hopefully for the next 50 years with these guys, right?
Yeah.
Like that is the cool part. Whenever I
We
see
talked
Daryl
about
with
that,
Ray
we're like,
Hitchcock,
man, we should try to do this. And obviously, it's we all have young families too at this point, so it depends on what the bowl game is and when it is. If it's December 26th, we're probably not going. But this year was awesome because it was so late, and so we talked about trying to make that an annual thing. But that'll obviously just be kind of dependent on when they play it, really.
I love
That's
it.
kind of what I say. That's what I say, right, guys?
Chip it's basically Rose Bowl or he's not going. Is essentially what we can't.
Nashville. I'm going to Nashville.
Oh, Nashville. Yeah. Well, we know you guys. All the players are going to Nashville too. The former players. They'll make that happen.
Nashville's one. It'd be nice to go back. I did tell my wife. I said, no matter what, if they ever go to the Rose Bowl, we're going. So
yeah, it has to be done.
That's non-negotiable. So
that's
has
right.
to be done.
Yeah.
Anything else, fellas?
Yeah, Matt, we appreciate it. I mean, all-time great.
This is fun. Thank you.
Deserves to have his name up there. Deserves to be in the M Club. There's nobody, and I'll say this. I mean, I've told Matt this privately. I mean, there's no better ambassador for Gopher football than Matt Spaeth. I mean, look at what he did, both on the field but off the field. The way he carried himself, the way he sacrificed his body to help that program get to a bowl game. He's everything you want as a Gopher football representative. So we really appreciate it.
Hey, Chip, I'll tell you one more last little story, and I've got to be careful not to get myself in trouble here. I grew up in St. Michael, but I'm originally from Mahnomen, Minnesota, right? My family's from small town, northern Minnesota. And I can't remember, and I don't even know if this is a violation, but I'll preface this because this is the truth, where nothing came from Gopher football to reach out to this guy. It was through a family member of when Coy was being recruited, right?
Yeah.
And there was some sort of connection with one of his high school coaches and my sister-in-law, I think, honestly. And it was when, towards the end there, when all the big schools were coming in and he was on the fence, right? And I'm not saying this, like, I'm not tooting my own horn that I had anything to do with him staying at Minnesota, but I just reached out to him and I said, you know what? You're going to make the right decision no matter what you do, but you can accomplish everything you want to do at the University of Minnesota. And I am proof. And I went from not nearly as highly recruited as you, but I had choices to go other places, and I chose to stay home. And I went on to accomplish this, and this, and you can do that too. You know what I mean? So I love Gopher football. I got a ton of pride, and I wish nothing but the best for them.
Man,
Nobody
what a
talk.
walk-off.
Oh, hold on. Nobody talk. So we're going to cut that, and we're going to send that to every coach at the University of Minnesota that they can send to their respective recruits. Ben Johnson, Don Plitzowite, Bob Motzko, Brad Frost. They all get that.
Well, be careful. I don't know that. I don't know if that was a violation. I don't think it was, because they didn't. Like I said, they did not tell me. And
No, it's not
Nothing's a violation anymore.
Yeah.
They're paying for
2025.
it.
If we get put on probation for that, it wasn't going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
That was awesome, Matt. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
It's always great to see you at Huntington Bank when you come back. Thanks for everything on the show
I'll be
today.
back
And
this fall.
we love it. And we'll see you at the next
when.
bowl game. Maybe
will
you
be.
can be the one to convince Chip to come to a bowl game as opposed to just taking phone calls from you guys at midnight from the bowl games.
Yeah.
We'll do it. We'll do it a
How many
different
phone
way.
calls did you get that night, by the way?
About 8 from Mitch.
Yeah.
He was asleep. Chip was asleep. He'd had his milk and cookies.
I would have been too if I wasn't there.
That's right.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate you.
All right.
Thanks,
See you
man.
guys. Thank you.
That's
Appreciate
Matt
it.
Spaeth. Jack's Cafe, JAXCafe.com. We'll talk to you guys next week on the Pear and a Spare podcast.